again, which I think is always a good time, at least for me, to remember, and a reminder that after the summer session, we sometimes forget that when the school year starts, you've got bus stops and buses and a lot more kids out on the street going to and from houses right during the same time that you may be commuting to the office. So just be extra vigilant as you start your commute here into the latter part of August and into September, that we'll still be getting into a rhythm with kids going to and from school again, and maybe forgetting to watch out when they're crossing the street. So it's always good for us to be extra vigilant there. So I would like to we can go around the room really quickly. We are going to be joined today by Peter Hastings from Kairos Power to do a presentation on some of the latest developments that they've had on the regulatory space with their advanced reactor design and some of the status there. And then we'll go through some of the updates from April on a lot of the great activity with VNEC. Bob Bailey is going to give us an update on the VIN Hub and where things stand there. And we'll talk a little bit about the strategic plan and some of the updates and actions coming in September with that. And we'll close it out with, we won't, again, vote on the minutes. If there's any discussion of the minutes, we can always have that, and we'll vote on it at the next meeting. And then if there's any news or member updates, we'll go from there. So, John, do you want to start us off? I think we all know each other now at this point, but since we have Mary in person for the first time, I thought it'd be good for us to go around the room. Okay, great. I think, April, if you're okay with it, we'll go ahead and start with the VNEC briefing while Peter is joining us. And then once he joins us, we can go to our speaker.
Okay, that works for me. So right now, as you all know, we're working on the strategic plan. We're having a summit in September with the industry to discuss what needs to be added and changed to the strategic plan. We're working with Virginia Economic Development Partnership as well. They'll be doing a presentation along with Virginia Energy, talking about some of the things that the state can do incentive-wise to help industry grow. So we'll be doing that, but the biggest part of that day will be going through the strategic plan and evaluating where we're at and where we need to go. The next thing we have going on is in October, we'll be putting together what we're calling a Nuclear 101 with the Nuclear Innovation Alliance. Patrick White, I think he spoke to the authority about a year ago, maybe a little longer. But we've partnered up with him to do a Nuclear 101 series for elected officials and other leaders in the state to just talk to them about what's going on in the industry, explain where we're explain what we're doing in the industry, give them a little bit of background on why we need nuclear and what exactly is nuclear energy. So that'll be happening in October. So those are the big things that we have going on right now. We also have a workforce meeting coming up with the community colleges that I'm really excited about, and having a conversation on that. One of the big things though is I was playing dual roles with Virginia Innovative Nuclear Hub as the acting executive director. I gave up that role to Bob Bailey, and some of you all remember Bob. I'm glad he is on board and taking on that job part-time. We are still looking for a full-time executive director, but Bob has definitely stepped in. He's been a huge help to us for the last probably year in putting together all the governing documents and getting us organized to go forward with the VIN Hub. So that's everything I have. Any questions?
April, can you remind, invites went out for the summit. I know we as representatives on this authority won't be the participants, but I believe most organizations have been invited to participate, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the summit invitation went out last week, as well as the Nuclear 101 event invitations went out last week as well. Everything is out. So if there's anybody in your organization that you would like to attend that may not have gotten it, please follow up with me. I'd love to include them in the conversation. The meeting will be in Northern Virginia at Virginia Tech's Boston location. We have a really neat spot.
And then I would also recommend, we talked about this at the last meeting. I know Scott Koppel provided some feedback already to April on some of the specific areas like around space and non-commercial nuclear. But as you look at the strategic plan that was developed 4 years ago, if there are areas that you see are priorities for your organizations that you would like to provide some input in, even though your organizations may be participating in the summit. If you want to provide them specifically to April, please, you can either send those to Ryan and he can send, or you can send them directly to April if you have comments. But I think it would be good for us to, even in advance of our kind of final review of the strategic plan, to provide that input directly.
I am going to be taking the strategic plan and putting it into survey format, so breaking it down in pieces so people can comment on different pieces. I will send that to Ryan to send out to everybody. I'm just trying to figure out the best platform to do that in, because a lot of the companies have security issues. It's already been fun on invitations, so not everyone's the same, so I'm trying to work through that problem right now, but hopefully I'll have that done this week. I plan to get that out by early next week.
Any other questions? Okay. I see that Peter has joined us. Peter, if you are ready. Bob, if you'll just hold on, we'll go to your update after Peter. So perfect. Peter, you can hear us, and in the room here, because I know on screen it's maybe a little hard to see the whole group around the table, but you've got representatives from industry and academia and the rest of the organizations in Virginia that focus on nuclear energy. We really appreciate you joining us today. For those of you who maybe don't know Peter Hastings, he's the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and Quality at Kairos Power. He leads the teams responsible for licensing and permitting activities, the safety analysis and probabilistic risk assessments, quality assurance, and government affairs, with a focus on establishing the regulatory basis for Kairos's reactor technology. I won't go into the rest of the bio, but for those of you who may know Peter and the work that Kairos is doing, we asked Peter to join us because Kairos has made such great progress in both the licensing and now, in very exciting news, the start of construction of their Hermes reactor. And so we thought it'd be a great time, and we appreciate Peter joining us to talk about, since he's really led and paved the way in the regulatory space for Kairos as the lead in the organization. It would be of great benefit for us to hear about that experience and everything that's going on at Kairos. So Peter, you are able to take as much time as you please. We have plenty of time for you. We really appreciate you joining us this morning. Oh, Peter, I think you're on maybe on mute.
All right, how about now?
We gotcha.
Great, thank you. And do you guys have my slides, or can I share them from here?
What, you can share them from you're able to share from there.
Okay. Give me just a second.
And they didn't seem discouraged by that. We just said, we would.
Okay, can you see my slide?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thanks again for the invitation to speak today. I'm going to do a quick intro of Kairos and then talk about some of our recent very exciting successes. And happy to take any questions. I can't see you, so if you'll have to give me an audible prompt if you want to, but feel free to interrupt with any questions. So anyone who's seen a Kairos presentation or been to a Kairos meeting knows that we always start with our mission, which is to enable the world's transition to clean energy with the ultimate goal of dramatically improving people's quality of life while protecting the environment. And this really is sort of baked into everything we do. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through this. So Kairos is an ancient Greek term for the right or opportune moment. And for us, that moment is the retirement. Originally, we were sort of focused around the retirement of a significant amount of natural gas generating assets at the end of this decade. And of course, over the last several years, another vector has emerged to sort of run parallel to that, and that is the identification of the need to repower coal sites. So we believe that not only the nuclear technology, but our technology specifically is ideally suited to help meet that need. So we are singularly focused. Our reactor design is really all that we do. We were founded a little over 7 years ago. I've been with the company right at 7 years. I think I was employee number 24, and we're now over 400, actually over 430 employees at this point. And the vast majority of those people are working on technical matters, design work, testing work, licensing, and so forth. We have a very small sort of administrative overhead staff who do really important work, but we try to keep our efforts focused on the technology as much as we can. We're unique among developers in a number of areas, not the least of which is our technology, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also our development approach that includes not only iteration on everything, and whenever possible, that iteration should result in demonstration of actual hardware. Also, in-house manufacturing, we have a significant vertical integration component to our work, and our intent is to really focus on reducing the cost of the technology, since the capital cost is the primary barrier to entry for this technology. In addition to reducing costs, we also want to reduce uncertainty, which really ends up being more important, because there are a lot of companies that can handle checks with lots of zeros. What they can't handle is uncertainty on the number of zeros that are going to be involved. So we pursue cost certainty, technology certainty, licensing certainty in an effort to help make our technology the lowest programmatic risk that the company can have. We are schedule driven to produce a commercial demonstration platform in the early 2030s with a rapid ramp up in deployment after that. And we're well on our way to doing that. And probably most importantly, our target is to be competitive with gas. And that's a very ambitious undertaking, but we're dead serious about achieving that. We're based all over the country. Our headquarters is in Alameda, California. Excuse me. In a repurposed World War II era airplane hangar on the former Alameda Naval Air Station. Beautiful facility. If you're ever in the neighborhood, definitely you should try to arrange for a tour. Sort of state-of-the-art Silicon Valley office vibe, but co-located to several tens of thousands of lab space, where we're doing prototypic design testing in the R lab or rapid lab, and that's where we actually prototype components with surrogate materials to make sure that the widget that we're designing right next door in the offices is actually going to do what we think it's going to do. Also, the S lab or the salt lab, where we're testing molten fly at temperature, fairly limited quantities because it's California, but we are actually testing with LIBE at that facility. Our second largest human footprint and largest real estate footprint at this point is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we acquired a former solar panel manufacturing facility, actually, that went bust, and have repurposed it. It was originally planned as a test facility for component testing, for testing safety-related components before installation in a plant. But it very quickly grew to include significant manufacturing assets and our non-nuclear prototype engineering test unit. As impressive as the headquarters tour is, if you're ever in Albuquerque, definitely take advantage of the opportunity to tour our Albuquerque campus, where you'll see things actually being built and tested, including rolling reactor vessels. I happen to run a small licensing office in Charlotte. We're sort of the East Coast anchor for the company, at least for now, but a very small office focused primarily on licensing. We also have a small instrumentation lab in upstate New York. We have a cooperative development agreement with Materion Corporation in Elmore, Ohio. They worked with us to pilot our manufacturing process for molten salt. And then most exciting, the site of the Hermes reactor, that should be plural, Hermes reactors, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I'll show you more about that in a minute. So for those unfamiliar with our technology, I mentioned it was a hybrid technology. We combined solid TRISO fuel with molten salt coolant. We're the only ones pursuing this particular kind of design. Everyone else who's using TRISO fuel is a gas reactor, and everyone else that's using molten salt has their fuel dissolved in the molten salt. We're sort of in between. So TRISO is a very robust fuel. It's been described by DOE as the most robust nuclear fuel on Earth. It's been demonstrated to have failure tolerance at temperatures that exceed our operating and postulated accident conditions by hundreds of degrees. So it's a really sort of bulletproof fuel design. Molten salt, really high thermal capacity, heat capacity, so it's great for more efficient heat transfer. It also has the benefit of not only maintaining single phase at all of our operating and accident temperatures, it also has a collateral benefit of having a very high affinity for a chemical affinity for radionuclides. So the stray radionuclides that do manage to escape from the TRISO fuel are very quickly sort of gobbled up by FLIBE, and it holds onto it very tightly. So all of that in combination with a very low, nearly atmospheric, excuse me, primary system temperature makes for a really, really low source term, which is a good thing to have in accident analysis and licensing space. I mentioned our iterative approach. The sort of stereotypical nuclear design and test cycle results in a lot of planning and designing and then building a big beast and wondering why it didn't work exactly like you thought it would. And we try to decompose that into a much larger set of smaller iteration cycles where you do plan, design, build, test cycles on individual components, testing frequently to failure, so that by the time you aggregate those components into a larger machine, say the engineering test unit, you have a much, much higher confidence that it's going to work as designed. That manifests itself in larger hardware cycles as well, where we have, I mentioned, the non-nuclear prototype engineering test unit in Albuquerque. It looks very much like a reactor, very much like our test reactor. It's the same size, has a lot of the same components. It obviously doesn't have nuclear fuel in it, but it does have 30,000 surrogate fuel pebbles in it, and contains molten salt, molten FLIBE at temperature. It's electrically heated. Obviously, we don't have nuclear heat to benefit from, but that machine just finished a 2,000-hour run. It was the largest FLIBE installation on the planet. And in this true spirit of iteration, we're in the process of decommissioning that right now. And as soon as that decommissioning is finished, we're going to build the second iteration of it, ETU2, in its place. The primary distinction between ETU1 and ETU2 is ETU1 was stick-built, ETU2 will be use skid-mounted components and help demonstrate that modular construction is in fact quicker, less expensive, and can be done as we've all sort of aspired for many years. ETU3, the third iteration of the engineering test unit, will actually be built in Oak Ridge so that we get the learning from the actual construction of the machine before going into actual reactor construction. Same construction crew, co-located facility, and so you can begin to get a feel for how that iterative approach really works. Following ETU3, the Hermes test reactor, 35 megawatt test reactor, doesn't produce electricity, very short operating life. Its primary mission is to demonstrate that we can produce cost-effective nuclear heat. Followed immediately by Hermes 2, a 2-unit, also test reactor, 35 megawatts each, producing electricity. So again, you see how the iterations build. Coming after Hermes 2, a non-nuclear prototype of the commercial size facility, the U facility, which will also be used for training. And then finally, the commercial plant in the early 2030s. So again, you see how that iteration approach really takes you all the way to commercial deployment. And by the time we get to commercial deployment, we will have built the technology or something that looks a lot like the technology 6 or 7 times, which we think helps reduce that programmatic risk really quite dramatically. I mentioned vertical integration. In the interest of time, I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but suffice it to say that if it's related to salt, if it's safety related, if it's not available on the shelf, we will make very quick efforts to try to procure a widget. And as soon as we conclude we can't get that widget with the cost or the quality that we demand, then we'll build it ourselves. And in Albuquerque right now, we are machining graphite for the internals for our reactor. We're prototyping fuel development, and we will actually be producing depleted uranium fuel pebbles in Albuquerque very shortly. We're beginning to stand up a facility to produce our own salt. And so you can see we pull as much of this into the company as we can in the interest of cost reduction. This is my nuclear tourist photo. And so you see Secretary Granholm speaking with my boss, our CEO, Mike Laufer. The really important part of this photo series is that the secretary and Mike are speaking in an open room in August of 2021 when she visited the facility. And less than a year later, we had the entire engineering test unit fully fabricated and ready to turn on. So that's the value of these iterations, is when it comes time to actually build the big machine, it takes less time. You've got a lot higher assurance that it's actually going to work the way that you thought it would. This is the engineering test unit number 1 in operation. Again, we had 30,000 surrogate fuel pebbles that we circulated for 2,000 hours in molten salt. You can see the graphite reflector internals being installed, loading fly. We've got a control room both in Albuquerque and in Alameda. And again, this machine ran for several weeks and is in the process now of being decommissioned so that we can build ETU2 in the same footprint. This is the brag sheet on ETU1. As I mentioned, it tested at 550 degrees for 2,000 hours. Largest flibe installation on the planet, highest flibe flow rate ever demonstrated, 25,000 strokes of the surrogate reactivity control system. Really impressive achievement, and we're looking forward to not only taking the lessons from that and incorporating them into Hermes construction and operation, but also making that next iteration for ETU2. This is the highest level of our regulatory strategy, in which we've been very successful to date. On the left side is all of our pre-application engagement with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and we submitted a ton of documents, had tons of meetings with them in advance of submitting our first application. Probably most importantly in pre-app space, we submitted and got approval of 12 topical reports. Topical reports, if you're not familiar with the concept, are sort of almost mini license applications, and true to their name, they're focused on a specific topic. They're typically phenomenological or methodological or programmatic. Try to front load the engagement with the NRC with some sort of meaty, sometimes difficult topics. Again, get that risk off the table as quickly as possible. If there's going to be a problem with fuel qualification, with testing methodology, with our quality assurance program, then we want to know that early. And in the absence of a problem, we want to get some finality around the NRC's review of that as soon as possible. The value in topical reports is they result in informal NRC approval, and then the content of that topical report can, for all intents and purposes, be incorporated by reference into future licensing applications. So really, really positive experience there. The Hermes construction permit applications and operating license applications will both be submitted and reviewed and approved under Part 50, as will the first KPX or commercial license applications. We will eventually pivot to Part 52 once we have a sort of an nth-of-a-kind standardized design that we can count on. And so we expect to do that pivot after the first commercial reactor. I've got down here that it could be influenced by Part 53. If you're familiar with that concept, this is the NRC's sort of advanced reactor new rule on how to make licensing advanced reactors more efficient. To be honest, I don't hold out a whole lot of hope that we will ever use it. It is an optional regulation, and it's not just that the NRC's first effort at Part 53 out of the gate was not what we expected. It wasn't a workable rule, but probably even more to the point, this is sort of a pragmatic matter. If Part 53 isn't stood up and demonstrated to be effective before we're in the Part 52 sort of work stream, then it's likely not of significant benefit to move over into a new licensing framework. More importantly, we have existence proof now with Hermes and Hermes 2 that we can license advanced reactors under the existing regulatory framework. It's actually not as hard as a lot of us thought it was going to be. This is the current. Well, this is a bit of a dated picture of the East Tennessee Technology Park pad where the Hermes and Hermes 2 facilities and the ETU3 are going to be built. This is the site of the former K33 gaseous diffusion plant building. If you're familiar with the Manhattan Project K25 site, this is just west of that historic site, sort of across the creek. After World War II, a number of gaseous diffusion plant facilities were stood up around K25, K33 and K31 are the two sites that we procured several years ago. And the good news is, and unfortunately, I don't even have a photo of this, but we actually broke ground at this site about 3 weeks ago for Hermes. So watch this space. We'll eventually have new photos for this site that actually shows us going to nuclear construction, which is really, really exciting. This is not at all what the site will look like because the deployment never survives the first artist rendering. And in fact, this one's already out of date. The ETU3 has been moved over to the west, so to the right in this picture. But fundamentally, this is what the site will look like. We'll have the ETU3 construction followed by Hermes, followed then by Hermes 2. And so it'll be really exciting to watch how the site unfolds in this regard. This is my brag chart for our work with NRC. And you can see it's sort of clumsily hand marked up because things are moving that quickly. So as I mentioned, we've got 12 topical reports that have been approved. We've got 2 more that are under review now, and a third new one that'll be submitted later this year. The construction permit for Hermes was a real success. So we went from procurement of the site to submittal of a construction permit application in only a little more than a year. Never been done that fast as far as we've been able to find. The safety review, the environmental review, and the ACRS evaluation were all three completed ahead of schedule. We had to deal with the sort of clunky mandatory hearing at the end, so our permit wasn't issued until December of 2023, but that's still sort of record-breaking performance. And it's a bunch of firsts. So it's actually the first construction permit of any kind that's been approved in several decades. It's the first Generation 4 reactor ever permitted by the NRC, and the first the first non-light water reactor actually ever permitted by the NRC, because the previous one was permitted by the Atomic Energy Commission. We're really happy with the performance on that, but we never rest on our laurels. So last July, we submitted an application for the 2-unit Hermes 2 test reactor. And we received a very ambitious schedule from the NRC staff for the review of that application. And just Friday, 2 weeks ago, we were informed that the safety review has been completed 4 months ahead of schedule, 40% under budget. It's kind of ironic because the environmental schedule was pretty ambitious, and they thought they could relax because the safety review was going to take longer. And then the safety guys finished 4 months earlier than they were scheduled to. And so now the environmental guys are saying, wait a minute, we didn't want to be critical path. We didn't think we were headed that way. And so good problem to have. The environmental assessment is finished. It's going through its final review. It was issued in draft several weeks ago. We know the comments that were made on the environmental assessment draft, and they don't change the final document in any substantive way. So we have very high confidence that we'll have the final environmental assessment by the end of this month or so. We also learned a couple of weeks ago that the commission had weighed in on an NRC staff recommendation to shorten and make more efficient the mandatory hearing. And so we expect that to happen on this proceeding. Hermes 2 was sort of called out by name as the pilot for that new process. And so we expect what was for Hermes a 6-month process to be reduced down to something like 2 months. And so there's a very good chance, unless something goes sideways, that we'll have the Hermes 2 construction permit before the end of the year. Hermes 2 was a success not only based on the schedule, but also in the continued willingness of the NRC staff to sort of help us innovate. Hermes 1 was great. In a lot of ways, we did a lot of audits in lieu of formal requests for additional information. We made really good use of an electronic reading room. The number of formal RAIs that were submitted for Hermes, you can count on one hand. That doesn't mean we didn't ask, that they didn't ask and we didn't answer a lot of questions. The number of questions numbered in the hundreds, but we found a much more efficient way to make that happen. For Hermes 2, because it's co-located with Hermes 1, it's the same reactor design. We negotiated with the staff the use of essentially a red line strikeout version of the Hermes application for Hermes 2 so that the staff could focus only on the deltas between Hermes and Hermes 2, and there weren't many. So that not only facilitated a very rapid review, it also facilitated the use of an environmental assessment in lieu of a full-blown environmental impact statement. These are all great for Kairos, great for Hermes, also great for everybody else, because it's allowing the NRC staff and the industry at large to recognize some additional efficiencies they can continue to realize and take advantage of those for the many, many other applications that they expect to receive in the coming years. Back to sort of our risk reduction, programmatic risk reduction philosophy and the value of iteration. I mentioned that we're trying to retire programmatic risk, and we think of those in terms of technical and cost risk, regulatory risk, and commercial risk. And we've talked about all of those, the iterations that we do on hardware, as well as the production of actual working hardware, the ETU prototypes, the Hermes reactors, all in advance of the commercial plant, really help drag that technical and cost uncertainty down. Regulatory risk, we retire through the comprehensive work that we've done with the NRC in advance of the submittals, through licensing using the test reactor process, and also recognizing that we know what the deltas are between a test reactor and a power reactor. And we're talking with the NRC about that all the time, again, to make our regulatory risk as low as possible. And commercial risk, again, by building things. As I mentioned, by the time we get to the commercial plant, we will have built something that looks like that reactor 6 or 7 times. Finally, we have the KPO-MATA, which is an Operations Manufacturing Development Alliance. This is a sort of a working partnership with the utilities you see here and one other utility that's not ready to be named publicly yet. Importantly, from their perspective, they haven't agreed to buy reactors from us. We don't have orders from these folks yet, but we wanted to make sure that we were designing and building a reactor that a future customer would be comfortable operating. So we build the insight from these companies into our design as best we can in an effort to do just that. And I said finally, but there's one more slide. This is reflective of our commitment to environmental justice. We've yet to build anything on a greenfield site. We try to repurpose facilities as much as we can. Our mission focuses on environmental protection. We have a very strong ethic around diversity and equity and inclusion. And fundamentally, and this is common to all of our peers, we're working with a technology that has some of the highest energy density around. And so it's just inherently the environmental choice. So that is the conclusion of my presentation. Again, I appreciate the offer to be here, and we'll be happy to take any quick questions.
Thank you, Peter. That was great. I have a couple questions, but let me defer to others in the room if there's questions for Peter. And if you could, so he knows who's here, if you could announce who you are. By the way, Peter, this is Tom DePonte. Well, let me kick it off. So Peter, I kind of have two on the regulatory side, your area of expertise, but obviously your success with the regulatory process is very well laid out in your presentation. But if you had to kind of maybe think about one or two things that were the kind of key drivers in that schedule and kind of efficiency success that you all have seen, are there things that you've done or the NRC's done that you think has, because if you look at past processes, the schedule and the schedule slippage has always been the biggest challenge. What do you think has been driving that success?
Yeah, we get asked this all the time. What's the secret sauce? And there really isn't one. Some of it is timing. We approached the NRC staff at a time where they were interested and eager to find ways to innovate. They need a win, honestly. So does the industry. We also went in with a very strong ethic on our part to not overcommit, but also, and this is where in a number of my past lives, the organization has failed. We did what we said we were going to do. We committed to a course of action for the topical reports, and we produced those topical reports, even when it required us, wrestling our own resources to the ground internal to the company to make that happen, because we had made that commitment. We have a very strong team that knows the value of communicating openly and honestly and often with the NRC staff. If something is going to go sideways, and we let them know as soon as we know it ourselves. We also were fortunate to get the A team on NRC, and we hit them at a time when they were interested in motivating themselves or innovating rather themselves. One of our earliest experience with them was before we even knew we were going to do a test reactor. We were originally going to go from the engineering test unit to the U facility to the commercial reactor. And it was only after I had been on board a couple of years that it occurred to us, hey, if we could actually do a nuclear iteration in that with ourselves as the only owner and operator and customer for the facility, then that would be fantastic. But before we made that decision, we were working with the NRC staff on the regulatory framework for a commercial reactor. And because we were not a light water reactor, we went into significant discussions with them about what should the application look like. We don't think we should use the light water reactor format and content guidance, standard review plan, New Reg 0800, if you happen to be familiar with it, because we didn't want the staff spending a lot of time having to justify why they didn't use Chapter 4, Section 12 of the light water reactor guidance because it has nothing to do with our design. We didn't want that sort of distraction. And to our pleasant surprise, the NRC staff and mid-level management at the time agreed enthusiastically. And they said, we not only don't want you to use it, we don't even want you to talk about it. We want you to come up with a new format and content to serve your reactor, bring it in, talk to us. So we did that. We came up with a format and content sort of from scratch. And the more we looked, the more it looked like the existing test reactor guidance. So before we even knew we were going to do a test reactor, we were using that kind of guidance on how to produce our application. The benefit for us when we then pivoted to do a test reactor is, guess what? Our application didn't have to change significantly at all because we were already looking at that sort of, even though it was purely bespoke at the time, it was built around what's the right answer for our technology. And that's sort of the kind of relationship that we were able to establish with the NRC staff up front. And it's always a little disquieting, if you will, to attribute the success of something like that to personal relationships. It's also important to recognize when that does have as much value as it did for us. So hard work, commitment, doing what we were going to say, doing what we said we were going to do, and being able to tap into a receptive regulator.
So on that last point, I think, do you sense, and maybe throughout the process you've seen this, do you sense, or you said that the NRC was interested from the start in trying to be innovative in this space, and do you sense a little bit of maybe it's just related to the staff that you're working with, or generally more of a cultural change where they are looking to be diligent but efficient, I guess, or do you sense that within the commission? Because it seems like that would be of huge value as they potentially get an onslaught of applications here in the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. For if I'm a member of the staff, the NRC staff, I look at the Hermes experience and I think, well, that's both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing that we're able to demonstrate as an agency that we can perform. It's maybe not such a good thing because now in my next project, I have to perform just as well, or I'm going to get a lot of criticism. And I think that's okay. That puts pressure on them. It puts pressure on us, right? Those who have seen me in industry meetings will know that I'm not one to engage in the sort of recreational sport of NRC bashing. A, it doesn't accomplish much. B, it's not always true. When it comes to some of the problems that we collectively have had historically with the NRC, it's not fair to say that those are all the NRC's fault. The NRC has done plenty of things wrong. The industry has also done plenty of things wrong. And I say that from a place of love. I say that with experience in my former companies where our companies have not done everything they needed to do to fulfill their obligation to make the process work. So we've sort of set a marker for others to join. We do get the occasional sort of snarky comment of, well, it's only a test reactor, what's the big deal? But the fundamental safety case for our reactor is identical between a test reactor and a power reactor. So we know what those deltas are. And so we've set a very high bar for performance, both on the industry side and on the regulator side. And in my view, it's actually absolutely critical to meet that high bar if we're going to accomplish the very ambitious goals that we all have as a country.
Any other questions? Mary.
Hi, Peter. This is Mary.
Mary?
I saw that the U.S. Department of Energy actually did a post a couple of days ago highlighting the start of construction for your project. And I thought maybe I'd just ask if you could talk a little bit about Department of Energy's role with the development of this reactor, and maybe whether they had any role on the regulatory side in any way, shape, or form. And I don't know if they would, but maybe you could address all of that.
Sure, really good question, and I should have addressed it in my presentation. So we are a Tier 2 awardee under the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. So if you're not familiar with them, Tier 1 is the demonstration programs, that's TerraPower and X-Energy. Tier 2 is the risk reduction tier. Tier 3 is ARC-20. And so those notionally are sort of on a scale from ready for deployment, nearly ready for deployment, and sort of longer term R&D. We fall into the middle category, although it's worth observing that we happen to be ahead of both of the Tier 1 awardees in terms of progress. Although we're not fielding a commercial reactor, we are fielding a reactor that will produce electricity, and so that I personally choose not to split that here. Anyway, it took us 4 years to get our ARDP contract signed, and that was our fault. Fault is probably not the right word. We did that very deliberately. We held out for a commercial milestone-based contract. What that means is that instead of sort of a conventional government contract where you get paid based on some prearranged schedule that may or may not have anything to do with actual meeting of deliverables, a milestone-based contract pre-negotiates in advance the value of each of a series of milestones, and when you meet that milestone, you get paid. You don't have to count paper clips and time cards. You just say, this was what we agreed to for the milestone. The milestone's completed, we get paid. The upside for the government is, well, for the contractor, it's a much simpler process. There's a lot less administrative burden. You don't have to become sort of the archetypal DOE contractor in order to be able to get one of those contracts. It's less expensive to administer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The benefit for the government is they're paying for performance. And so if you have a series of milestones and you don't meet those milestones, you don't get paid. And the milestones are very simple to demonstrate. So for example, we had a milestone around 3 of our topical reports. We had a milestone around the construction permit application. We had a milestone around the receipt of the construction permit. And if you want to see the demonstration of those, well, here's the topical reports. Here's the license application. Here's the license. It makes it very straightforward. It took the DOE a long time to sort of get their heads around how that kind of a contract was going to work, because they just haven't done it before. But it's been very successful, and since then they've begun to use that concept in other projects going forward. To the question of their involvement in licensing space, they really haven't been. They've been very hands-off in terms of the actual execution of the contract. For a couple of reasons. One, that's just the way that the contract is developed. I don't think they have a whole lot of involvement in the other ARDP awards either, in terms of sort of micromanaging, which I think is a positive thing. It's also reflective of the fact that from the time we were named as an awardee until the time we actually got our contract signed a few months ago, we didn't stop. We didn't wait for the DOE money. We went ahead and executed those milestones because we knew we had to in order to meet our schedule. So we sort of self-funded all of that work up until the time the contract was signed. So DOE really, even if they had been inclined to sort of get in and help manage, they didn't really have the ability to do that because we didn't have a contract.
Okay, well, Peter, thank you for joining us, and thank you and to everyone at Kairos on your team for all the leadership you're showing in the industry. We really appreciate it. This was a great presentation. If there's anything we here in Virginia can do to help, we're always here. But really, thank you for joining us. This was great.
Thank you again very much for the invitation. Have a good day.
You too. All right, we're going to move to Bob for the update on the VinHub.
Fantastic. Everybody can still hear me okay?
Yep, we got you.
Yeah, so I guess in a way, I kind of feel like the Garrison Keillor song called "The Cat Came Back the Very Next Day." I've been involved in this industry for a long time. I was a member of this authority until my retirement a couple of years ago, but here I am again. For those of you who don't know me, I have been involved in this industry since the mid-'80s. First as a vendor, then on the workforce side, and then most recently running a regional R&D center in Lynchburg that had a nuclear focus. So I've had my hand in a number of things here. And maybe me coming back to this is just a metaphor for the workforce challenges that the industry has right now. So real briefly, the hub, we call it the VinHub, Virginia's Innovative Nuclear Hub, is meant to be a collaborative effort to bring together and focus and collectively magnify the resources and the capabilities of Virginia to support this industry. The hub itself is a result of some things that the governor put in his budget, I think the previous fiscal year, and it's come out of that. The hub was incorporated as a nonprofit in February of this year. And as April said, I came along and kind of helped with some of that setup. Since April, we've been building out some of our key policies and processes for how we want to operate. We did conduct a search for a full-time executive director, and the result of that was we weren't able to kind of finish that, and so the decision was to pivot a little bit and bring me in as an interim part-time director, just to continue to kind of build this out. And that actually could be a really positive thing, because as a new startup organization, while you can communicate a vision to somebody, it's hard to tell somebody exactly what that position is going to look like. And that's a challenge both in recruiting, but it's also a challenge in that you may not get the right person. So what this is going to allow us to do is to continue to make progress, but to get a better feel for what we really need, what skill set we need, what type of person we need to have that can pick this up and run with it. The VinHub itself, its work plan has three basic pillars. We want to focus on collaborative R&D to really bring together the research and development resources that we have in the Commonwealth to drive technical solutions to problems. We want to focus on building and addressing the workforce challenges, and we want to focus on public education and outreach. Some of you may ask, how is this different from VNEC? And I think that's an important question. And the difference is fundamentally seen in the type of organization that we are. VNEC was formed as a nonprofit 501c6 organization, which is a member organization. And that means that everything they do is for the benefit of those members. VinHub is organized as a 501c3, which is with a mission of research, scientific research and education. Everything it does is for the benefit of the public. So while we might look like we're doing the same activities, the fundamental difference is the ultimate outcome of those activities. So VinHub's R&D efforts are meant to drive technical solutions that improve the life of citizens in the Commonwealth of the U.S. Workforce is meant to drive economic growth. But essentially the difference between benefit of members and the benefit of the public, and that's what the VinHub is for. One of the things, I think the R&D side is probably the primary effort because there's a lot of opportunity there. Um, we currently have 4 universities that have been active in this setup of this: Virginia Tech, UVA, Virginia Commonwealth University, and Liberty University. And we have a 5-year plan that is still undergoing some refinement and will be undergoing continuous review and refinement. But right now, that plan is focused on things like building and strengthening the research capacity in the state. And one big example of that is that we want to really aggressively explore what would be involved in getting a research and education reactor back in the Commonwealth. We had one many years ago, but we don't now. And that's a really important piece of infrastructure that you want to have if you want to be a leader in nuclear energy technology development. It includes looking at developing modeling and simulation technologies to look at life cycle issues, both at the component level, at the system level, and the plant level. We want to look at analysis of some of these advanced plant designs and site analysis for these designs. How do you match up siting locations for the type of plants that you have? We want to look at some safety and detection technologies that would drive the safety of these plants even stronger. Supply chain analysis. We all saw the pain of that coming out of the pandemic, but that was an issue for the nuclear industry even before the pandemic. And so looking at that and coming up with some solutions to that. And then finally, solutions for the byproducts of the nuclear reaction. There's lots of opportunities there. So we're working on a 5-year plan right now that's looking at those areas. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. On the workforce and the public education side, there are a lot of people doing things in that area. So our initiatives there are going to be focused on identifying who's doing those things, creating collaborative partnerships with them, and then having each of us serve as force multipliers for those activities. We don't need to go out and create new things. We just need to do a better job of coordinating and collaborating those efforts and focusing them to get stronger outcomes. So that's the high level plan. That's where we are right now. What are we doing next? First, the simple thing, and this is something that the authority can help with, is we want to start building, and we are starting to build a database or a stakeholder registry of people in Virginia that care about these 3 things. And in fact, that would be a request to the authority, is not just obviously members of the authority should be in that registry, but to have you go back to your individual organizations and communicate back to us. Here are the people in my organization that need to know what you're doing in R&D. Here are the people in my organization that need to know what you're doing in the workforce. Here's the people in my organization that want to know and can help you with the public outreach. Because that will allow us to organize that stakeholder list in a way that we can drive more impact out of that. So right off the bat, we're working on that right now. Similar to that is that we are close to looking at strategically building out the board of directors. We currently have 5 directors that have been really dedicated and really focused on standing up this organization and putting the organizational infrastructure in place. But we're going to soon start looking for other people, other candidates that can start to fill gaps and bring some unique skills to help grow that. So we'll want to start exploring that with everybody as well. In a similar fashion, our bylaws call and our plan calls for a technical advisory group to focus on all 3 of those efforts, but specifically on the R&D plan, to make sure that we have third-party eyes and experts looking at that R&D 5-year R&D plan and make sure it has the right things on that list, the things that need to be solved and the things that Virginia has the capacity and the skills to go solve. So we'll be looking for candidates for that technical advisory group as well. And then we'll be looking for organizations that want to explore joint R&D projects. We can do projects directly with industry, or we can do projects that are funded through DOE or NRC or some of those others. But a big part of this is improving the connection between the industry and the R&D assets, and improve their ability to work together. Joint workforce projects, we'd be looking for those. Joint events and the public outreach side of it as well. And then just access to other resources, whether that's funding, whether that's expertise, whether that's facilities, or just helping building the network out. So those are the things that we're looking, that would be our call to action now, that we're really focusing on as some next steps in growing the hub and growing its activities. So I am sure we will be back in front of you many times, if not a regular part of your meetings. That's probably where we should be, so that you know what we're doing, and getting feedback from this group as well as just providing reports back for you to include in your reports to the General Assembly. So I'll stop there, and again, happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Bob. So to your request about some help with identifying the stakeholders within our organizations, can you kind of draft a little, kind of summary ask that you could provide to Ryan, and he can get it to all the authority members, so we can circulate that within our organizations and help you get that list? That'd be great.
I was going to do that. Absolutely.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right.
Also, one thing as that the agreement we have is, because Ben Hub is just part of the family tree of VNECA and VNEC, Bob, you will be at these meetings giving an update every quarter with me. So anyway, but thank you.
Assumed that would be the case. And in fact, I'm sure, like when we're talking about collaborative efforts, we're already working on these master collaboration agreements with these universities. We want to expand the number of universities and R&D assets, and we'll also be looking at some type of MOA with VNEC. They'll be one of our strongest and one of our first partners as well. So
great. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. So I did want to go over the annual report. Our last meeting of the year was where we'll come together to review the update and approve the annual report. Ryan, can you just provide a quick update on schedule for the updated draft? I know I would ask everybody to take a look at the annual report. I know it was attached to the meeting notice, and if you have updates, provide them to Ryan. Otherwise, we'll collaborate with staff to get that updated and have the draft out to everyone before our next meeting.
So the plan for the annual report is it's due to the General Assembly by November 15th. So we will meet in early October to discuss any final edits of that report. Between now and that meeting, I will update the 23 report to include the activities of 24 for things that happened within the board, as well as any other edits you send to me. And at that meeting, the board will then empower me to make final edits and submit the report. I will be resending out the 23 report just for everyone's edification. At the same meeting, we also need to deal with the strategic update, though.
Can we set a timeline of having the draft report out by like mid-September? So depending on when we have our meeting, we have sufficient time to review.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
I will have the draft out by mid-September.
Great. Thank you. So we will hold off on the meeting minutes. We'll push that to the next meeting since we don't have quorum. And I think we've covered the strategic plan update. April provided that in her VNEC briefing. So if, we'll get to that at the next meeting as well. There's plenty of nuclear news, but I think we've circulated a lot of it. It was for those that got to participate from the VNEC board. I know I saw a number of folks, but the bill signing at North Anna last month, and also the same day as Dominion's announcement, where they've launched a process to formally start reviewing technology options for a new reactor potentially at the North Anna site. Was a really great day. There was great turnout. The local stakeholders were very excited about the process, and the turnout from frankly all the workers was very impressive. So that was a really great day. Hopefully, we'll have another one for the other bill. But if there are any other updates, I think I have asked Eric Carr at our next meeting if he can provide potentially just an update on the RFP process that Dominion is running. So we can get that the next update. But any other updates from various members? Okay. Then with that, we will go to public comment. The way I think will be most efficient. Do we have any public in the room? No, David, did you want to make any comments? No, you're good. Okay. So if you're on the Teams and you have the ability to raise your hand, please do that if you'd like to make a comment. Otherwise, Erica, I believe you're on the phone. So if you'd like to go first, because I don't think you can raise your hand when you're on the phone. So if you'd like to go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, hey, Brian, can y'all hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Well, I wasn't even on mute unless you just unmuted me. Well, I guess, of course, you've already heard my distress this morning because obviously even the Virginia Department of Energy did not have the correct passcode to even call in, and the ability to see any of the slides or anything was not available. And by the time I actually was able to get on after speaking with you personally, by the way, the notice online, the Commonwealth calendar, I think y'all need to do a better job. This notice, I don't even know if y'all gave notice to the public in time because I've been watching for it. So, but that notice, the information wasn't right. So if anyone else wanted to attend, they wouldn't have been able to because there was no contact number for a person either. So with that, I basically missed the whole presentation that was given because by the time I got on to be able to listen in, it was 10:50. So I just, I worry because you guys are supposed to be, I would imagine, more technically available to be able to do these sort of things. So someone needs to check on these things before the meeting start. Otherwise, it's really unfair for the public to really be not engaged. So that's not a very cool thing. So I would hope that I wouldn't have to bother the poor librarians a couple of times to be able to try to participate. So I can hope y'all will do a better job at that next time. Anywho, I did want to mention that, you know, in a warming climate, no one ever talks about the issues with these nuclear power plants and how much heat they radiate. Prime example this summer, Lake Anna has spent a good part of the time since Memorial Day being closed and water being checked because over 24 people became sickened and 4 people went to the hospital, mostly children, because of E. coli. And unfortunately, the checking on things, it seems like they didn't even really get the test results going until weeks after the incident. So I am concerned with people's safety and health in dealing with these warming waters. And it's not like it's some quinky dink because, you know, these nuclear power plants, I mean, they're emitting steam that's incredibly hot. And so, where did I have my little note? Well, I guess I was too frustrated during the whole issue. I probably kind of got sidetracked. But releasing the steam that basically is vaporized is somewhere in the vicinity of 600 degrees Fahrenheit. It's mentioned online in Celsius because it sounds better. But the reality is this water that is being vaporized and releasing the steam is got to be looked at because it's producing so much heat. And then the water that goes in after into the cooling pond, I wasn't able to find an exact answer on how hot that was, but I think it was somewhere in the vicinity of 300 or so degrees or hotter. So I do believe that, you know, a lot of these small modular nuclear reactors, from what I've read, are going to be doing the same thing. I don't know if there's an improvement on that or not. The other biggest complaint I have with the whole situation at North Anna, besides the E. coli that then later ended up in the algae blooms, is Lake Anna has basically had harmful algae blooms and no swim advisory since 2018. And in 2022, the lake was added to the state's list of impaired waterways because of the algae blooms. So, yeah, and so the toxins can include skin rashes, upset stomach, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. So, I mean, obviously that's the problem. But what's really disturbing after following the heat waste treatment facility that Dominion has it there is they used to release daily and hourly reports. They check the water temperature in the morning and throughout the day, at least 5 days a week. They give you the temperatures of the discharge water. And now they've gone to just, and not always 5 days a week, because sometimes they miss a day accidentally, I guess, 5 days a week, one temperature check, and they're taking it like at 5:12 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And last week I saw a temperature of 103 degrees. So the task you would think would be, you know, how can we do better? But instead, it looks like the NRC is updating it to allow these nuclear reactors to actually release even hotter water. So instead of more regulations to protect the public and the environment, we're getting less. And that's probably my biggest can of worms today, other than we did have one small this month. Well, actually last month, end of the month, last month, we did have one small earthquake in Culpeper. But when you look at the other one in West Virginia and Tennessee, you can follow that there's a time frame. You know, I just want to remind folks that I'm sure y'all all know that North Anna nuclear power plant has been sitting on a documented ancient fault in what is called the Virginia seismic zone. We are playing with fire. So, you know, Dominion can decide if they want to go forward and rob us ratepayers to pay exorbitant prices for dangerous technology that has not been tried. Yeah, they'll be filling their pockets with money while everybody else takes the risk. And our children's for 1,000 years will have to worry about the waste. And I understand that FEMA did their biannual, which we haven't seen the test results yet of the emergency planning, but mind you, it's only for 10-mile radius around the plant. Lord help us in every county other than that, and Richmond City, because it encompasses in the 50-mile radius of both Surrey and North Anna. So I'd like to say, y'all talk about doing more and new, but what we have right now, we are not prepared. And mark my words, if we keep at this, what the NRC is allowing and what the federal government is allowing and what the Biden administration has been pumping in billions of dollars to open up even old closed nukes, we're going to have a problem. So I'm disappointed in the lackadaisy ability for the public to be able to attend these meetings, even on the phone. Thank you, Ryan, for calling me back so I could get the number. Otherwise, I do not have confidence. We already have a bunch of waste we don't know what to do with. The canisters themselves, I think, are inefficient for a long haul. And nuclear energy is not clean energy. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments? Okay. Not seeing any, I will close the meeting, and I thank you. We will look for a meeting invite for early October. I think we'll talk about it, but we may actually do that one virtual because I believe we have the opportunity to do that, and that way we make sure we have a full quorum for the annual report and strategic plan. But keep your eyes out from Ryan for that. Thank you, everybody, for coming down.